Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of The Comic Source. I'm your host, Jace. This is another crowdfunding, creator-owned spotlight. We're here today to talk about a really interesting book. Tons to talk about. Only a week to go with the campaign, so a limited time. You want to be sure to go and check it out as soon as you can, because it's not going to be here much longer. But the name of the book is Conrad Cottonmouth, and I have the creator, Michael Connors, joining me. Michael, thanks for taking the time.
Thanks for having me.
So why don't we start off? I have a lot of questions. Thank you for letting me read the book ahead of time, and I want to talk about the tiers as well. But why don't we start off by letting our audience know what's the elevator pitch? What, in your words, what is Conrad Cottonmouth about?
So it's just about an ordinary rabbit. He falls down the rabbit hole and discovers an alien technology, gets zapped into another world where they experiment on him, and he becomes incredibly smart. And he could basically build any machine, and he could teleport anywhere in the world. And he finds a friend, and he goes, and the story kind of evolves from there. Gets involved with the CIA and government, and there's a whole plot of the world coming to an end, and he's going to save it, type of thing.
Yeah, so many different threads coming together, so many different ideas, kind of classical influences, if you will. So. Can you give us a little bit of an idea of how you came up with the idea and some of the things that you think influenced the story?
So I actually had the idea when I was a teenager many years ago, and I recently picked up the story again, and I just started writing away based on the plot of this rabbit. And he's more like a catalyst, he's nonverbal, doesn't really have a lot of motivation for other than he's just a rabbit, but it's really the people that are around him, and the themes that kind of evolve around this story are, the limitation, the dangers of technology kind of getting unchecked, and the problems of just being human, and like what as a human, like having like the limitations of dealing with this technology and our flaws, and our desires, and how the rabbit just kind of helps some of the people he meets along the way, along those storylines.
Yeah, I mean, he's so cute. You can't help but kind of root for him, and it seems that that's sort of the case with the people in the story that meet him. But on the other hand, there's that kind of dual meaning, right? Like you use the phrase a couple times, falling down the rabbit hole. Certainly it seems, when we talk about falling down the rabbit hole, the whole idea of Alice in Wonderland and this crazy world we find ourselves in right now, in some ways it seems like this can't be reality. Have we fallen down a rabbit hole, whether it be where we are with technology or politically or what have you? So you think it's like the perfect time to get this story out there?
Well, I think yes and no. I mean, I think this story, I feel like this story, it could be any time, because as crazy as things are now, I've always kind of said this with, even with friends and family, that it's always been crazy. If you look back, I remember talking to my uncle, like, just about the political climate and stuff, and I'm like, in the 60s, it was incredibly crazy too,
Yeah.
So this story kind of taps into, it could be any time, right? I mean, we're always kind of looking like this is some alternate reality, and, and things seem to be going off the rails, or they're not. I mean, we could look at any point in time, and even like in the 1800s or something, and say, yeah, this is a crazy time too.
The other thing I think using a cute little bunny rabbit does, so first of all, again, the art is spectacular, and we'll talk about your process in a minute. But this idea of a cute little bunny rabbit, and you can kind of read it on that surface level. Maybe for younger readers, or, read as a bedtime story to your kids or what have you. And there's kind of the initial surface story that's just this rabbit who has these powers. He's able to teleport. He's super smart. And, that's just fun. He goes on these adventures. But then for older readers like myself, there is that deeper meaning that we're talking about, whether it be politically or technology or trying to find a way to get along, or this whole idea of sort of the fact that we're all facing, the older we get, your own mortality is sort of on your mind, facing kind of the end of the world kind of stuff. What's the world going to be like when I'm gone, and what have you. Was that something you were conscious of when you were crafting the story, that you really wanted it to have those multiple layers for all sorts of different ages?
Yes, definitely. I mean, I wrote it and I constructed this as a wider audience, as a crossover. Hopefully, I don't know if I've actually accomplished that, but that was definitely the goal, to make something that would reach the younger and older. Almost like what Harry Potter did, which is an amazing feat that she was able to reach a wide breadth of audience, which is what I was kind of hoped to do. It is. I wouldn't call it all ages. The current story, which you read, and maybe the next book, it doesn't. It it's not. It's not really adult, so there isn't like bad language or any kind of nudity or anything in it. But at some point, the rabbit does kill people, so that's why I'm going to rate it 12 and up.
Right. Yeah. Fair enough.
It's not a happy story either, right? I mean, it's like just how humans are flawed in many weird and funny ways that are, appealing maybe to adults that they would understand, but I don't know that little kids would get it. I do have my daughters read it, and they're 11. I have twins, and I run everything by them. So it wouldn't be anything that my 11-year-old daughters would be able to read, but I know that it probably will get pretty intense hopefully if I can get the other stories out there. So the other books.
Yeah, that's an excellent point. So again, 3, 4, 5-year-old, maybe a little mature for them. So yeah, probably around that junior high range, maybe a little younger for this. So I mentioned the art is absolutely fantastic. You're doing everything, right? Like from the writing, the line work, the color work, the lettering. This is all you. Is that correct?
It's all me. Yeah, I did everything from just starting with sketches, and then I scan them in, and then I also been inking with just markers and pens, and then I scan them in and take them to the iPad and color them in. And I spent like months just kind of crafting in a plot. The plot goes very far for like 3 or 4 books, and this is the first one. But I've been gathering a lot of feedback too as I get it, so I'm not working totally in a vacuum. But yeah, it's all me. Ideally, I should have an editor at some point though, so I'm probably gonna run by some people though.
Was there because I talked to a lot of people that it seems more on the self-publishing side where you get writer-artist as opposed to work for a company. Usually those things are sort of separate. Do you find one particular part of the storytelling more challenging? Because the other thing that I noticed right off the bat, the first maybe 20% of the book or so, there's a lot of storytelling that's just visual. When Conrad is like first getting his abilities and what have you, I mean, he's a rabbit. He's not going to talk, and there's no humans in that part of the book. So it's a lot of visual storytelling, which I thought was done really, really well. You prefer that? Do you like when you get to rely a little more on the dialogue? Was one part more challenging than the other?
Yeah, I started the whole process just with a Reddit thread where it was those pages of him getting, being zapped to the alien world and stuff. And then from there, I wrote the story, and I found it very difficult to tell the entire story without adding some dialogue to it. So, and I'm not writer by trade, so coming up with dialogue that made sense was hard too. I had to go back over that process quite a few times. But I felt like it would be like really kind of hard to tell the story that was so complex without any dialogue. So it would have been a very long, a lot of illustrations to kind of push that through. But yeah, I mean, because part of a good storytelling ability with comic books, especially visual storytelling, is to be able to tell the story without any dialogue. So as I construct it, I do look at what I'm building and drawing and seeing if this story makes sense to me without the dialogue at all. And I feel like I kind of did that, and then add the dialogue on top of it to see how that works out.
Yeah, I hear this from a lot of artists who then want to write their own stories. But the hardest part is making the dialogue, especially when characters are having a conversation that goes back and forth, making it sound natural, because the way you think something sounds in your head is different than how somebody's actually when they start reading it, especially with the back and forth. So I could see that being something that you probably have to go back again, maybe read it aloud, make sure it doesn't sound kind of awkward or what have you.
Yeah, I mean, well, definitely, it's not, I don't have any formal training in that. My formal training is in drawing and production, like print production. So I was making a comic book, was pretty. I've had a lot of experience in that type of work, but not in the actual writing. But since I'm doing this all on my own on a limited budget, I kind of had to like figure that part out. So, and I've asked around a lot, and I got a lot of good advice. And reading it to myself as later as I wrote it, and then reading the dialogue out loud seems to help quite a bit. So, and then seeing if that kind of makes sense, but.
Yeah, I want to talk a little bit about your color choices as well. But before we get into that, I do want to remind everybody, like I always do when we do these crowdfunding episodes, the best way that you can help Michael out, obviously other than joining the community he's building here with Conrad Van Cottonmouth, is to share it on social media, right? Like there's a very limited time. It's totally my fault. I wanted to have Michael on a lot sooner, just been super busy. But there's when you hear there's just a little more than a week left, and he's almost there. I mean, he's charging very little for the book. I think the digital edition's $2. You can get the print for $7. He's I think like $50 away from funding it. So again, maybe this sounds like fantastic, but times are tight. We get it, and you're not going to be able to. Just don't have the means right now to join the campaign. The other thing, like I said, that you can do is let your retailer know, let your friends know, anybody who you think might be interested, put it out there on social media. Let's get as many eyes on this as possible because he's so close. He's so close to funding. So obviously we'd love for you guys to go and check it out. There's a link in the show notes to the campaign. You can go and look, and hopefully you'll join. And if not, please just share it on social media. Let's get the word out here in the home stretch. So I mentioned the color work, Michael. Do you completely finish your artwork like it's really tight pencils, or do you kind of finish it up in the coloring portion of it when you're doing the line work? You're like, okay, I know how I'm going to color this. Are those just really linked in your mind as you're doing the line work, or is it a completely separate process?
No, I would say I start just black and white, and then with the sketches, just rough sketches, and then I'm really more looking at the composition and seeing how one panel is going to flow into the other, and if that's really kind of pushing the story along, and if it's got a good flow. And that's really without any sense of what the color is going to be, but really more of what the values are going to be. It's going to be a dark, gloomy scene, or is this going to be bright, or what key that's going to be and how that's going to affect the mood and how that flow is going to go. Sometimes you might even start dark and then move into a brighter scene, just kind of keep that motion going. And then I'll sketch out tight. I have a very small little Costco printer, scanner printer set up, and I scan in, I print it out, I redraw over it, and then finally I'll construct it and run to Staples and print out larger 11 by 17s, put them on a light box and ink over them. With the sense of how that light's going to, still with that sense of how that light's going to appear as I move over to the coloring. And then when I push it, when I'm onto the iPad, I lay down a flat color with those values saying it's going to be, more towards the light or dark or, just a kind of like a subtle mid-tone. And then I start laying colors on top of that. Generally, I try and stick with a limited palette and then add to that. But really, it's less about color, more about value, because that's really what makes things kind of pop out. It's funny, you could have something that's just like weird pink and purple, but as the values are correct, it really makes a huge difference,
Yeah, and all the time I've been doing this and talking to creators about the color, nobody's ever brought that up, but you're 100% right. And I talk about it all the time, and the way I describe it is when you get like a classic superhero book, when it's those really bright primary colors, it automatically just feels sort of Silver Agey and sort of classic, as opposed to something that's a horror book where the value is much darker, colors are a little more muddy. Yeah, you're right. It's all about the value that kind of sets that tone, right?
Yeah. Like whether it's the light or dark, or even to add that depth, right? I mean, if you have like the back lighting or something really bright behind something dark, it could definitely set the storytelling and the mood of it, which is really important.
Is is the coloring more? I've heard this from creators as well. The hard part's the line work that, like you've talked about, wanting that transition from panel to panel, make sure visual storytelling is strong. The coloring is just sort of relaxing and kind of everything coming together. Do you find that to be true?
Yeah, I think so. Because I don't know, I just kind of zone out and I just start laying in like what this thing should really kind of look like, and then you just keep muddling around with it, and at some point you're like, oh, that's correct.
Yeah,
that's working, or you just go look back at it like a week later, you're like, my God, what was I thinking? I gotta step that out.
I've heard that from other creators. Like you said, you kind of zone out, you just kind of get in that flow, and before you know, it's kind of done. So. Well, I mentioned a couple of the tiers. The digital tier for $2, the print cover for $7. Then there's another. There's various covers actually for $7. I think 3 or 4 here, and then there's the variant bundle where you can get them all. Very simple in terms of what's available. You know, you didn't do like the stickers or the T-shirts or the hats or what have you. Really kind of focus on the story with what you're offering here, and again, a very low price point. I mean, a lot of Kickstarters for the print copy, it's $20, whatever. You're able to keep it low. So talk a little bit about the decision to just keep it to the book, to keep the rewards simple, and to have that low price point.
Well, so for me, this is my first Kickstarter, and I wanted to keep it simple and to reduce the amount of mistakes that I could be making on it. But also because I'm producing everything myself, I can keep the price point low. I didn't know why. I don't know if it made more sense to keep as a standard price of like what everyone else is doing higher, but I didn't really have to because I'm not paying a writer, I'm not paying an artist, and the book is 100% done, and I'm going to reprint it regardless. So I thought in that sense that the price should be reflective of that. I wanted to make it accessible to people. I really am more focused on, I don't know if this is the correct method of doing it, but I'm really more focused on building this as a property, and getting it out there and getting into people's hands, and then kind of going through that process again. I'm hoping to get through this one and then quickly into the next one. I'm already on book 2, writing and drawing that one. And then on that second Kickstarter, then start introducing other parts to it. But, not being the Kickstarter expert, I wasn't really sure on the logistics of sending these things with it, and I think I will figure that out as I go along. But right now I'm just kind of super hyper focused on getting this IP out there and into people's hands and trying to build a traction with it.
Yeah, I've heard that. It's very familiar to me to hear that. I've heard it from some others who've kept the price point low. They're like, man, more than anything, I just want to get this story out there because I think it's good and I want people to read it and understand it. And then, yeah, you let everything grow organically. So kind of on that note, to reach a wider audience, any plans once you've printed issue 1 to do any shows, any comic conventions or what have you?
Not yet. I'm looking to see how this works out, and I'm going to try and figure out the logistics of that. I may speak to a friend or two. I'm really good friends with, I don't know if you know Jay Photos.
I do. Yeah.
Him and I went to high school together, and I speak to him all the time. He's a fantastic guy. Jay's like the greatest guy in the world, and I'm always kind of chatting with him on Facebook and stuff, and he's giving me advice. So I may try and figure something out here. I'm East Coast, so I'm in New Jersey. I moved here a couple of years ago from New York City. Maybe I can try and see if I can get into a lot of the shows here. I know there's an indie one coming up in Connecticut in fall. That might be one worth checking out for me. I'm not really entirely sure though. I have to kind of see if I can get this going first.
Yeah, again, I just think it's first of all, like I said, the art is amazing. The book looks amazing. With your experience with producing books and what have you, I think the production value would be really high. But it's a character that kind of feels like it could blow up. It feels like people would fall in love with him. He's so cute. He's so funny. and yeah, I could see it really becoming something more. The other thing that I think of, and again, maybe I'm putting the cart ahead of the horse here, it would be really fun to see other artists, like interpretation of what he would look like, so maybe on some subsequent Kickstarters you can get bring in other artists to do variant covers or what have you, and we can get this this really cool look of this character, because I think there's a lot there. And you mentioned 4 issues for the initial story, but I gotta think that this character kind of lends itself to just almost an infinite number of stories. We talk about alien technology, traveling around, inventing stuff. So I'm sure you have a ton of ideas, right?
Yeah, no, I don't even know if it would be limited to 4. The entire plot I have in my mind goes pretty far out, so I think I could probably even pull more than 4 stories out of it, for sure, because he's going to try and like save the planet, and I mean, not too many spoilers on it, but the aliens left a what do you call it, malfunctioning power plant on Earth, and it's going to destroy the planet unless they refuel it. So he's got to try and figure out how to get the fuel, and then he's going to refuel the plant to try and save the planet. And it goes like further. There's like lots of different avenues I can go with that. So
yeah,
it should be super interesting. I think it's going to be a lot of fun.
Yeah, I mean, the first issue was great, and the other thing that was interesting about it, even though we're talking about this, genius rabbit, he can teleport alien devices and spaceships and what have you, like heavily leaning into the sci-fi. The book starts off with this little sort of hint of like, fairy tale, Greek myth, gods, sort of prediction or what have you. I hope we don't go so far into the sci-fi that we lose that, because it's an interesting sort of juxtaposition there where it's like, yeah, it's all this future science tech and what have you, but what's the legend, what's the prediction, what's the sort of the magical, mythical part of the story. I think there's a lot to be explored there as well.
Yeah, I was like, I really love that character as well, the Oracle that comes up in the beginning, and then a little more of a spoiler, she comes back at the end, at the last pages too, and then it's a super interesting take on it, and it sort of does kind of tie into the sci-fi, but I'm going to try and keep it also, as you mentioned, part of that like Greek mythology thing. And
yeah, really, really interesting. Well, again, Michael, best of luck with the campaign. Everybody, reminder, link in the show notes. Go and check it out. It's almost there. About a week to go. So if you're so inclined, please pledge, or at least post it on social media so we can get the word out and let everybody know. But as we're winding down here, Michael, any last thoughts to share with our audience?
No, I just thank you so much. I really appreciate it, and please check out the book. It's a lot of fun. I think lots of people are really going to enjoy it, and we'll see you soon. Stay tuned.
If anybody has any questions, do you have a presence on social media? Is there some place that people can follow you?
Yeah, there is a website, ConradVanCottonmouth.com. You can definitely email me there, and I also, if you go to that website, there's links to Instagram and a Facebook page as well. Or but email is probably the best way. I mean, for sure.
Okay, and I'll put a link to the website in the show notes, everybody, also. So if you're having trouble finding it, you can just go click there and check it out. So again, Michael, pleasure chatting. The book's fantastic. Best of luck getting over the finish line.
Thank you so much. Have a great summer.
And to you listeners, we want to extend our thanks to you as well. We really appreciate you joining us as always, and we will talk to you next time.